So the title of the talk is Magic Fact Find Foam to Have Customers Eaten Out of Your Hand. That might sound like an exaggeration, but what is it that creates a top salesperson? What is it that compels customers to buy from you? Is it because you've got the gift of the gab? Is it salespeople who are really knowledgeable about the product? Is it because you've got a great price? Is it because somebody's great at closing? What is it that gets the sale? That is the big question. It's the million-dollar question. If you had the answer to that, then the world's your oyster. 10 leads equals 9 appointments, sold at very good money, and we're all on the beach. But it's not a fantasy. It's a possibility. We did the Salesperson of the Year competition on the very first Fit Show. If you go onto YouTube, under, I believe it's Fit Show Sales Professional of the Year competition, and you'll be able to watch the show. We actually had a house. We had around about 25 people put in for the competition. It was £10,000 to the winner, and one person won it, and he clearly won it. The 4 finalists had to do their presentation to the customers. Now, the customer circumstances were this. They had condensation. They were old Victorian windows. Vertical sliders is what they were wanting. They didn't know whether to have it done in PVC or timber, but they were leaning towards PVC. When they were sitting at the settee next to the windows, they were freezing cold. Even in the winter, with the heating on full blast, she had to have a cardigan on. Also, next door was broken into. Using a PVC door, they broke into a PVC door, and they had the same PVC door fitted by the same firm. So they wanted the security at the back of the house. The 2 main windows they wanted done were at the back of the house. Also, they wanted to get a quote for the full house, the front as well. But mainly they were thinking of the 2 living room windows at the back and the back door, which was next to the living room windows. Another thing they were interested in was soundproofing, because they've got 3 dogs at the back, and these 3 dogs can start barking day or night, and once one starts, they all start. So soundproofing was an issue. This was in August when we filmed it, and the customers wanted the windows in November, so they wanted to wait for 3 months because he was getting a bonus from work, and that bonus was guaranteed in November. They were staying in the house long term, so they didn't want to put anything cheap in. That was their circumstances. If you can find out those circumstances, then you've got a better chance of helping the customer get the product, basically. They're going to buy from you. The guy that won it, Adrian, won it basically on the fact find. I interviewed the customers after each salesperson went through their presentation, and I said, what did you think of the fact find? Then I said, what did you think of the design that they came up with? And then I asked the next question, what did you think of the product, if they did bother to show product? What did you think of the prices and so on? With the customers, I said, what did you think of the fact find with Adrian? And basically the customer said that. He wasn't interested in how much money he could get out of us. He was interested in what was best for this house. There were 4 finalists, £10,000 to the winner. All 4 finalists were 50% strong converters. 50% or more was the conversion rate. Guess how many did a fact find? 2. 2 did 0 fact find. Of the 2 that did a fact find, one got a little bit of information accidentally, and the other got all of the information deliberately. But by getting the information, having the customers talk about their problems, and listening to what they're actually saying is what won it. Now, I've been training people to sell windows and doors for 20 years, and the fact find is the hardest thing to master. So I came up with a form, and I said, look, fill this form in, but do it in a specific way that I'm going to show you, which is what I'm going to show you this afternoon. And you will achieve perfection with the fact find, with all customers, very consistently. So why do so few salespeople do a thorough fact find? Well, in my experience, it's because they're too busy talking and telling them all about themselves instead of listening to the customer. Another reason, and which is what happened at the Fit Show competition, the customers took the salespeople straight into the design. We don't know whether to go for timber or PVC. We're thinking we should go for vertical sliders, even though the casements were put in about 40 years ago. Straight away, the salespeople were sucked into that and answering customers' questions, and the fact of why are you changing windows, when are you changing them, what do you like, what don't you like, what about condensation, what about security, never came up. Unbeknown to the customer, they felt that because it didn't come up, the salesperson was not interested in them. He was only interested in himself and his product. Research shows that, in fact, this is American research. An American research company took a top 100 salespeople from the top 100 companies in America with sales organizations, and they looked at the number one salespeople in all those organizations. And what they found, which was a surprise to a lot of people, doesn't surprise me, was that there are two ends of the scale. One, you've got the interesting extroverts, people who are the life and soul of the party, can talk themselves to death, and they've got the patter. And at the other end, you've got the interested introverts, quiet people, not outward going, but they're interested in the customer and genuinely interested. And the top salespeople were round about here on the scale. They were interested in what the customers had to say. Now, most people don't think that. They think, oh, we'll take that person on to work for our company going out on the quotes because they've got a bit of personality and they like to talk. But that's not what customers like. Customers love to buy. They just hate being sold to. Have anyone read the book, Stephen Covey's book? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Sold 10 million copies. Habit number 7 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Okay, so we're sold on the fact find. So when is the best time to use the fact find form that I'm just about to show you? Well, you've got 5 steps to a sale. I don't know if you can see that at the back. I'll talk you through them if you can't. Can you read that at the back? Yeah. Okay, the first step is measure and understand the customer's needs. The second step is to go through all of the design options and pick the perfect design. The next step is to pick the right product for their needs. Now, you can't pick the right product for their needs unless you found out what their needs are. Then, of course, you send them a quote, or you quote them when you're there and you discuss the price options. And then whichever way you're doing that, you then agree the next step. Now, the way that I like to use the fact find form is I'll go around with customers and I'll measure, and there's no form in sight. So it's an informal conversation. While measuring, I recommend you find out the what, why, when, if there's any stages to the job, and how long they're staying in the home. They're the big questions. And you do it naturally while you're walking around chatting to them. You might do a little bit of design as well, although design is really for the next step. You shouldn't mix your steps. Then there comes a stage where you found out as much as you can. There comes a stage when you sit down with the customer to go through the options, yeah? And while you sit down, I then get the form out and say, look, do you mind if I just go through the form and find out if there's any, because there's no point in paying for things if you don't need them. Let's find out what you do and you don't need. And then I sit down and go through the form. I know you can't see it there, but this is what the form looks like. We'll send a copy of it to you, and I've got a close-up that we can zoom in onto. Basically, the form is in 3 stages. You've got the top part, the middle part, and the bottom part. If the salespeople at the Fit Show competition had used this form, they would have found out absolutely everything about the customer. Customer would have felt heard. They would have got the keys to the safe, found the customer's hot buttons. They would have been able to scratch exactly where they itched. And only one managed to do it. Okay, the first part at the top of the form is the needs analysis. So what we're doing is we're finding out what it is the customer wants, and also we're asking the master question, what got you thinking about the idea of changing the windows? The customers would have said, well, mainly because they're so cold and drafty. Now, I'm going to give you a tip here. Whatever answers they give, you should probe. They're cold and drafty. Whereabouts? Just near the windows? Or tell me more about that. How did that lead you to think about changing the windows? And what do you do about it at the moment? And that gets a good conversation going. What I do with the customer, because I've already been walking around and discussing this with them, once I sit down and get the form out, I'll just summarise it. So that's what I'm recommending you do if you do use the form. So you sit down, you're saying, right, you mentioned they were cold and drafty. So I'll put down cold and drafty. You're thinking of PVC or timber, tick, 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 and then we'll move down the form. There are 11 reasons, I should say, that people change the windows. I like to go through all of them to find out what they do and they don't need, because it's going to affect what specification of glass we put in. If it's security, it might affect the locks that go on and so on. So with the customer, I would say, right, what I've found it's useful to do is go through the form and tick. So, okay, you've mentioned it's cold, tick, so I'm putting a big yes for cold. You've mentioned that it's drafty, so I'm putting a big yes for that. We didn't talk about security. Is security important to you? Now, obviously, the PVC door and windows that we can do for you'll be secure anyway, but you can go extra secure if you want to, in terms of the specialist glass you can put in and so on. How important is that to you? And they might say it's not important at all, and they might say it's important. Now, here's a little tip. If they say, oh no, security's not important, we've got the alarm and we've got the dog, then I like to tell them what they would have got if it was important. So I might say, oh, in that case, you won't need laminated glass. It's just a specialist glass that we put in that you can't break with a hammer. So you won't need that. Guess what? You get a brownie point. They're thinking the last salesperson didn't ask that and they didn't even mention that. And then we'll go on to the next one. Are there any rooms that particularly overheat that you would want not to overheat? I had a customer a few weeks ago. She says, yes, actually, the daughter's study. Says it's right up a height and it just on the summer it really gets hot. I says, are you quite happy with it getting hot? You just open the window, or would you like for it not to get hot? Because again, there's a specialist sealed unit we can put in. She said, no, I would like that. If it can be fixed, I'd like to stop that because she's studying, you know. Says, right, okay, you can put a solar reflective. I'll quote you for leaving that in, leaving it out. And then you go through those questions. Quite often the customers say, do you know what, we've had 3 quotes and you're the 4th and nobody's mentioned half of this. Condensation, soundproofing, seems a quiet house to me at the back. Is soundproofing an issue? Now with this, the one at the Fit Show, it did seem like a quiet house, lovely quiet back garden, but there were 3 dogs across the way that kicked off. That would have came out. Yes, there's 3 dogs. Oh really, what happens? What do you do about it at the moment? Well, there's nothing we can do, I work nights. And so on. Okay, well, there's a certain glass you can put in. It's much better than normal double glazing for soundproofing. I'll quote that in. Another little tip, don't get into showing them an asymmetric unit just yet for soundproofing. Leave that till later. At this moment, you're just planting seeds. You can water them, but you can't start demonstrating because you need to keep your steps separate, basically. Okay, and then we'll move further down the form. The last bit of the form is, when are you looking to do this project? Is it in the near future or distant future? And there's a reason I'm asking. These customers will say, well, actually, we don't want to do it for 3 months. Some customers say, oh, we're not in a hurry anytime this year, which isn't what you want to hear necessarily, is it? But we do want to hear it because we need to know the circumstance. Some will say, oh, I want it within 2 or 3 weeks. If you can't do it in 2 or 3 weeks, don't bother. In which case we don't want to hear that. If we're 6 weeks, we need to know this information. The next question on the when, the first question is when. When B is, how would you feel about waiting a little bit longer to get fitted if it meant saving a little bit of money? It's just, if we do a flexi-fit system, I recommend you start doing a flexi-fit system, by the way. What we're saying to the customer is, look, instead of waiting all the way over there, if you get fit a little bit earlier, but wait a little bit longer than normal lead time, we'll give you a little bit of discount on any upgrades that you go for. And what the customers say, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100 is, yeah, we'll wait a little bit longer if it means saving a bit of money. Okay? Little tip here, you don't want them thinking they're going to get it for less money. That's why I say to them, you can get any upgrades reduced. And by the sound of it, you do need a few upgrades on the glass and the locking systems. So now they're thinking, oh, well, I wonder what the upgrades are, and I wonder how much more it's going to be. So now we know the what, the why, the when. Another question I like to ask is, how long are you planning to stay here? Because it will affect some options, and that allows you to get into the quality of the product later on, and it allows you to understand their needs. So, once you've found out what you need for your fact-find form is something to show and prove them. On the fact-find form, there's round about 15 questions. Each one has a reference number next to it, and each reference number on my iPad, I have photograph albums. So that later on, or even while doing the fact-find, I can show them things that are relevant to them. So this is actually a snapshot of my iPad. Here you can see it says heat gain. Here it says heat loss. Here it says flexi fit. Here it says furniture fading, security, soundproofing. So in soundproofing, there are 30 photographs relevant to how you can get better soundproofing with PVC windows and doors. These are my albums for the frame finish. If they're staying long term, they want to go for a high gloss frame ideally, or a medium gloss frame. If you look at it under a microscope, it's like the surface of a mirror. Some profiles are like the surface of a brick. Just means the dirt engrains in much slower and they stay clean longer. You just use soapy water instead of cream cleaner. Now you probably all use that as standard, but if the customer says, no, we're staying long term, you want to be showing them it later on, you see. So the fact find is teeing up what we're going to show the customer later. This is my heat loss album. I know you can't see it there, but when you get the presentation, then you can have a look at it yourself. Because if you tick the form, leave your details, we'll send you the presentation. With the Fit Show customers, they wanted to, there was cold radiating off the glass. That was one of the problems. So one of the solutions is to have low iron glass on the outside. Low iron glass is clear instead of green, lets more solar radiation through, and more light, by the way. And if you have a soft coat on the inside instead of a hard coat, it'll warm the inner pane up. So that's a solution you could explain to the customer. Yeah? For soundproofing, triple glazing's no better than double glazing for soundproofing, but for soundproofing you have laminated glass on the outside, 4mm on the inside, and here's the proof, show and prove. Laminated glass on the outside, 4mm on the inside is 50% more soundproof than single glazing. Normal double glazing is only 20% more soundproof than single glazing. So you show them the solution, then you prove it based on what you've been told in the fact find. I found this one online actually. This is a sealed unit for using in conservatory roofs, which is Pilkington Active Blue was one test, and I've got a thermometer on it. You can actually show the video to customers. The temperature went up to 41 degrees from 20 degrees, whereas if you're using the Celsius 1 version, the heat gain, it only went up to 24 degrees from 20. Hardly any heat gain. I actually have a heat lamp to show the difference, but also you've got those tools as well. So basically, in a nutshell, the fact find tees up everything else. The customers think, God, you actually care, and you're listening and not talking. And then later on, you can show them and scratch exactly where they itch. And it's almost like you're tailor-making the window, the glass, the frame, the hinges, the hardware to suit their exact circumstances. And you've got the evidence to prove it. So in a nutshell, who cares wins. So fill your details in, we'll send you the fact find form, give it a go. Feel free to ring me and let me know how it goes. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it's life-changing. And if you get some new salespeople work for you, they don't have to be great at selling, you just say fill that in. I also have a form for the design as well, so whether it's a casement window, vertical slider, flush casement, door, they just tick all the different options with that product. You've got photographs for each one, and the customer's saying this is just like shopping. You say, right, the next thing you got to decide is, do you want this type of horn or this type of horn? Here are the photographs. And that's how I get my conversion rate to 8 out of 10. And that's how I help my clients get up near that level. You have to be able to speak Geordie to get 8 out of 10. But if you're a normal human being, you can get up to 7 out of 10, no problem, and get good prices. So thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure.